We're up and running, Emily, and streaming live. So we will call our meeting to order and entertain any motions.
I move that we enter into executive session for the purpose of discussion regarding proposed pending or current litigation, collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, and matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of particular persons and/or corporations.
Second.
Second by Joe. All in favor? Passed unanimously. We will be back shortly to the good folks. We'll be back and we'll make sure that folks know we're headed into executive.
I think we should give it a couple shots.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna get.
Well, thank everybody for coming. We are back
Can I do
from
it at the very end?
executive session. I know we'll have one board member who will be joining us momentarily as they walk in. But we'll continue on with our agenda for this evening. Are there any modifications to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll continue. I do not believe we have anyone who has signed up for public comment at this point in time, which hopefully means there's also no board responses. And we will move to our phenomenal student representatives. Thank you for joining us.
Who do you want to go first?
It's your choice. You want to go, Zara? By all
Am I going
means.
first? Okay.
Jacob, we're pointing at you.
Yeah, we just closed out cycle 1, which is very exciting. And we're starting our evaluation system. All students have now written their self-reflections, and now our teachers are writing them to hear how we did this cycle. We recently, our last ASM was talking about the importance of ASM. We actually got a proposal saying that what would happen if we got rid of it are all school meetings. And we wound up going into really reflective conversation about the importance of school democracy and the balance of like administration, of obviously the importance of that, but also the decisions that can be made by students and when it's beneficial for it. Because there's a lot of topics that happen inside of the school, and being able to come together as a community and talk about them as a whole body, it really unites a school. The benefits to it, especially with our proposals of even like tomorrow, we're gonna have a meeting talking about connecting with local agriculture so that our food can be better at the school. And the conversations around that, including as a student, it will only encourage us to do it further when we're adults, and the importance of understanding the democracy. Yeah, so it was a really great conversation for our school. What are we doing? This weekend, we have our production of Midsummer is happening, which is exciting for all the Shakespeare fans. One of our classes, Facing History, is starting the process of looking into going into DC and going to the Holocaust Museum in January. And Katrina Relief is starting their fundraising to go down to New Orleans and still continue aiding and help with the disaster that happened in New Orleans. Katrina, yes. That's all it says.
Fantastic.
What
Thank
kind of fundraising is the drink group doing?
Currently, we're doing merchandise, LACS related merchandise and yard work, but we will be doing citrus soon, which I will probably come tell you guys about.
Right.
Well, I'm looking forward to my Blue Ox hoodie, so we'll.
Of course.
Ithaca High School, are you ready for us?
Yeah, we all enjoyed our 3-day weekend. Winter sports began yesterday. Boys swimming in the new pool, girls and boys indoor track, girls and boys wrestling, cheerleading, boys and girls hockey, boys and girls basketball. We are sad to say goodbye to Coach Welch as the head coach of indoor track. We are excited to welcome Coach Mack.
And
The Morocco trip recently began leaf raking to fundraise, so let Ms. Crawford know if you need your yard raked. And IHS recently had lockdown day where we had 4 lockdowns during 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th period. These were relatively smooth, although we were released over the PA system, which is different from an actual lockdown, so that caused a little confusion. It was smart to have lockdowns during most classes, so we knew where to go. We also talked with Mr. Bryman about the capital project and its effects at IHS, which will include new gender-neutral bathrooms in G and H buildings.
We had the great pleasure of meeting Miss Grover. She's incredible, and we talked about how to effectively help get mental health days implemented in the simplest and most effective way. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, and we also heard that the broken fence, the tennis courts will be fixed before the spring, which is great to hear. The theater department is putting on Alice in Wonderland, and our marketing period finished last Thursday.
And I would like to give a shout out to Mr. Trumbull because the high school's been running pretty smoothly, as you can tell based on our recap of the past couple of weeks. So yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. Board responses.
Thank you, Zara. Just a little bit upsetting that we still have to do Katrina relief fundraising. It's actually scary, but please, when you do start the citrus sale, contact us. I would love to, even though I know a place to get good citrus. I would gladly spend my money with you.
Well, if you guys need any yard work too,
And yard,
we are also providing it.
Oh, you sure about that? My yard's really small. Yeah, that was actually all I had. Okay.
Anybody else with board responses?
Quick question, what do you think is meant by Katrina relief at this point? Have you guys sketched out?
We go down to the specific area in New Orleans and we go down, there's still a lot of exteriors of houses that are still not fully fixed yet because it's an area where it's difficult for people to afford to be able to fix, like get their porch fixed. And we go down there and we help fix porches, we help, like, we do basically almost all types of handiwork, like inside houses, but a lot of carpentry work. We go down there and try to help the exteriors of houses, like repaneling and that kind of stuff.
My only response was a follow-up on the shout out to Mr. Trumbull. I am wearing my Ithaca College sweatshirt in recognition of Ithaca College winning the Cortica drug, and I had the great pleasure of meeting one of our most esteemed Ithaca College alum, Mr. Trumbull. We had the opportunity to spend some time together at the game, and it was also great to see him. So thanks for the shout out to Mr. Trumbull. Thanks for all that you do, and I'm glad Ithaca won the game. It was a great game. Fantastic. We will keep it moving and move on to the consent agenda.
I will move the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Chris, seconded by Pat. Any questions, comments about the consent agenda?
The only thing really to make note of, we do this once a year, 6.2, the resolution to approve the program service allocation methodology of shared services between BOCES. We just have to vote on that once a year. So that's one thing on there. Nothing real big or exciting.
Anybody else? All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously of the folks who are here. And that will move us on to the superintendent report from Dr. Brown. Good to see you, Dr. Brown.
Good to see you. Thanks for the time on the agenda, Professor. Just one item. Today is School-Related Professionals Day. So I'm hoping folks have heard about that. If not, I'll just read a list of the folks. In New York State, this is an official day to recognize the folks I'm going to list now. Clerical, custodial and maintenance, food service, health services, paraprofessionals, security services, skilled trades, teaching assistants, teaching aides, technical services, and transportation services. So that list of folks, that's what makes schools work in New York State. So if you see someone who is represented today on School-Related Professionals Day, say thank you. Like the person to my left who makes all this work with short notice. I appreciate you, Emily, and everyone else.
And in abstention,
Tricia Beresford, also,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
board should definitely
Our board
recognize
person.
Tricia.
Cool, that's the only item I have. We have a lot of them. Thank you.
We'll keep our agenda moving, and today we have a special presentation about professional development support update. And I will call folks to come join us to give us an update on our professional development.
Ms. Grove and Ms. Talcott coming up here to share some thoughts.
Sorry, Holly.
I'm glad we have made the change to have a clicker for people to do good.
I know.
It only took us a decade,
I've been
right?
recommending it for a while.
It's 2022.
So when you
Dr.
go online
Eversley
to order
Redwell,
one of those, is it a clicker? Doesn't it have, it has to have a real name?
Presentation remote.
Oh, I like clicker
Alright, good evening everyone, good to see everyone and everyone at home. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lily Talcott and I get to serve as the Deputy Superintendent for the school district.
Good evening, I'm Mary Grover, Assistant Superintendent of Inclusion. Thank you for having us, giving us this opportunity.
Typically, we tend to talk about professional development, usually a little closer to the summer, and do a little bit more of a recap and let folks know what is ahead for the year and what's happened over the summer. And due to some other timelines, we didn't have an opportunity to do that. So we wanted to make sure that the community, the board, folks really understand how the funds are being used that the board so generously allocates to professional development, and the work that we're trying to do in order to support our educators in this sort of new era of school. So I'm going to talk a little bit about big picture and then some specifics. Got a clicker and I evidently, thanks Emily. It's like I just needed to press it a little harder. Yeah, you know, I do have some advanced degrees, but I can't operate this properly. My apologies. We wanted to start with a quote that we've found is driving a lot of our work professionally for both me and Mary, and is driving a lot of the work around professional development and professional learning for educators. And this comes from some of our consultants we're working with through the Equity Consulting Group. And this quote is, "Identity is at the crux of equity and justice." So much of the work that we do with educators for their own learning has to start with the self and understanding ourselves, right? And how we show up in our teaching and learning spaces, how we show up in our interactions with other folks. And so we use this to really ground us. Specifically, we have clearly a very large focus on Learning Forward ICSD. Some of you may have seen this slide before. There are 4 key pillars that I'll talk about a little more briefly, and then Mary will talk about the specific elements and professional learning opportunities that are within those 4 categories. So the first one is students as partners and leaders. The second is educator identity work. The third, anti-racist curriculum for all. And the fourth is structures of support. This is a really print-heavy slide, and if you're curious and want to learn a lot more about the specifics, watch videos of examples of what this really means, you can definitely take a look at our website, and you'll just see Learning Forward ICSD is right there, or it's ithacacitieschools.org/learningforward. You'll see there. But specifically, we know this is based on lots of conversations with educators, with kids, with community members, and based on research. As we were coming out of COVID, right? The summer uprisings, right? The protests, the Black Lives Matter movement that was so key in the summer of 2020, right? We were getting ready to come back to school in person, and there was a lot of narrative about learning loss, right? and the approach of like, we've got to skill and drill kids, they've lost a ton, we gotta, you know, really get some skills going on, right, for kids. And we said, hang on, let's use research and conversations from the educators who are in our spaces and the students in our spaces in order to design something that ensures we have a clear direction forward that's in alignment with our vision and mission, right? So we need to partner with students, and not just partner with students in ways like this, which is awesome, but we also need to partner with students in the curriculum design process. Mary will talk about some of the ways we do that now. And we need to hold ourselves accountable to doing that. Ongoing identity work for us as educators, and that's in everybody in the organization, right? Who are we? How do we show up? Thinking about gender expression, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, religion, sexual orientation, right? All of these identities, and how do they show up in my classroom, in my interactions as an administrator? How do they show up in my curriculum, et cetera? Anti-racist curriculum for all, this won't be new for us, right? This is our anti-marginalization curriculum with a really heavy focus as well on literacy and Dr. Muhammad's 5 pursuits. And then structures of support. None of these things can be possible without clear, really specific structures such as ongoing professional learning, right? Community partners, how are we providing after school opportunities, et cetera.
All right, so some specifics, and I also want to echo appreciation for all of SRP staff, because as we're talking about these professional development opportunities, acknowledging that we also want to include our bus drivers, our ESPs, our cafeteria staff today, having the privilege of being in a building and watching their talents and engaging with young people. It's a real moment of gratitude. And so I want to start with really centering students as leaders and partners. So this summer we did something pretty unique. We were in year 5 of anti-marginalization curriculum writing. And so a huge shout out to Lisa Sahasrabuddhe, who helped start that 5 years ago. We had 12 educators scaling up to this summer, having 125 participate. And having, in addition to the 125 educators, writing anti-marginalization curriculum units for the school year, we were at the same time reading feedback from students that we had hired, either paid them through youth employment services to give feedback on the curriculum, or they received in-service credit or work-based credit that the hours they can accrue results in an elective credit. And their feedback was invaluable.
We're inviting them to some of our students to come present at a board meeting next month so that they can talk a little bit more about that process as well.
We also had students sitting shoulder to shoulder with reading teachers, general education teachers, special education teachers on the struggles of learning to read and decode, and attending the same professional development as they would be supporting students at Project Innovation as older reading buddies for students. The educator identity work, I want to take a moment because last night I got to walk into this room at a similar time, and there was a room full of 25 new educators starting the identity strand to really examine their racial, ethnic, and cultural identity and how that shows up in the learning spaces that they create. And the educators facilitating that work are equity team members. So big shout out to Teresa Souchet and Chris Barley, who are launching that. That's an exciting cohort. And then the other piece, we've gotten feedback on integrated social emotional learning and de-escalation strategies. What does that look like in the classroom? So how are we going to first acknowledge how we're feeling in a situation before we try to support someone else. I often find as a teacher, just pausing and taking a few deep breaths was one of the most effective tools that I could have, knowing what the energy I was bringing to the situation. So that's the foundation of therapeutic crisis intervention in schools. I wanted to take a moment to explain that because the title alone, I don't think is fully reflective of the de-escalation strategies. And we are engaging in continued training throughout the school year. So we had approximately 50 educators participate in a week-long training in the summer, and then they get refreshers throughout the school year. And we simply, huge shout out to our TCIS trainers. They're a group of 6 in our district, and we're going to be scaling that up to have more trainers so that every building will have at least one TCIS trained educator and ESP in their ability to offer workshops after school. Pause for a moment. Talking a lot. I want to acknowledge that it's a lot of information to digest. So I touched a little bit on the anti-racist, anti-marginalization curriculum writing, but we also have culturally and linguistically responsive coaching. So we have 4 buildings where educators are volunteering to have a non-evaluative coach come in, observe a session, and give them feedback on the instructional strategies they're using. And that is with Dr. Shiraki Holly's organization, which is very much connected. And it's really hard, even as we put them in these buckets, to separate that curriculum writing and pedagogy from the identity work because of the overlap. And then lastly, the structures of support. So you'll see in your agenda, there's links to specific workshops and the professional development for co-teaching, for ESPs, for literacy, and also to do that while not asking ourselves, how are we authentically and genuinely partnering with caregivers is really important. So that's why we've added that family engagement strand to the micro-credential under the structures of support.
Good, we'll probably have some questions here.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so again, I want to take a moment because I really feel that the history and the journey of this micro-credential is important. That it started in collaboration with the Equity and Inclusion Leadership Council, and what could we do to support educators in a sustained professional development strand, and what would we need to do so? So, and then cue Lisa Sahasrabuddhe as a teacher on special assignment 4 years ago now, drafting up what these strands would look like, family engagement, identity, and then the curriculum writing and the coaching are 2 parts of that anti-marginalization strand. And now we find ourselves at a place in collaboration with some union leadership from both ESP Union and the Teachers Union, thinking about, all right, how are we going to present this at new educator orientation? Because all new educators are participating in this in their first 4 years. They're going to complete those 3 strands. And I would, really need to say that the identity strand started with the equity team completing it 2 years ago, and now it's teacher sustaining. So now those teachers who completed the identity strand are the ones facilitating it for new educators. And they went through it. I had the opportunity to go through it with Laura, and she is offering facilitator training for our educators as they turnkey it. So the whole micro-credential is teacher sustaining, and that as soon as you complete it, you're in a position to coach peers.
Just to clarify for those who are new to the culturally and linguistically responsive micro-credential, you can see that there are components of it that we sort of separated out into the different categories, right? That you then see on that next slide, right? That's a big part of our professional development, especially for our new educators. And it is only part of the larger story, but it's pretty exciting that it's actually happening after many years of building up to it. I would say EILC has been really pushing for stronger culturally responsive and professional development and ensuring that every educator gets access to it for I don't even know how many years. But it's exciting that it's happening, and we have really great partnership, I would say, with union leadership, with building leadership, with educators, so it's exciting. We're gonna pause there and let everybody jump in with questions, anything that wasn't clear, anything that we're missing.
GABB watch parties?
Validate, affirm, build, and bridge.
Okay.
That. So you may see there's some cars that have some teacher cars that have my school is fabulous on the back. Right, so we validate and affirm cultural behaviors, right? The 16 cultural behaviors, so that might be around like sociocentrism, and then we build and bridge toward more like school-based behaviors, right? So those are some of the actual skill set and mindset ways forward to be a culturally responsive educator, as per Dr. Holly and his organization. Did I say that right, Mary?
Absolutely.
All right.
And they're videos,
Okay.
30-minute videos, and Popcorn has been involved at some schools, where staff gather, watch the video, and the video pauses and gives you opportunity to talk with colleagues. And all of this is based on the research that we know that educators need administrative support in pursuing this. They need opportunities to have a cohort within their building, they're doing this together, and then commitment to use what they learn within 48 hours of hearing about it. And so that Fab Party is a great opportunity for all three of those things to take place.
Questions from board members, yes?
Question, so Mary, you said for the therapeutic crisis intervention, 50 educators start in the summer for 1 week. So those same 50 will be accountable to continue throughout the school year for continued training?
Yeah, they have it's optional, it's nothing that so TCIS is out of Cornell, and it's a branded curriculum. And so it requires 24 hours of training to be TCIS certified. And then our trainer said, you know what would be really great for kids and for people who complete the series is that they have a refresher during the school year, because we often offer it in the summer, and so you can't apply it right away. So being able to come back and say, okay, I tried this, this, and this, and I need some feedback. So that's the intention of those, the trainings that are happening throughout the year.
Additional board member questions?
I was just about to ask, go back to the slide, so thank you. There's a lot on that slide, like you in tone. If you can talk to us about where you see pushback from staff. Is there any one particular thing on this slide that is causing people to have significant responses? That's a lot of professional work there, and I'm just curious if there's anything we can single out that's giving people a pause?
I think it depends on the educator. Mary didn't talk at length about grading for equity, that's on there. We've been engaged in standards-based grading work at our two middle schools, DeWitt and Boynton, and folks have done some really exceptional work, and it's also tricky work. The high school has been engaged in conversations about grading for equity very specifically around practices that we have had for many, many, many years, right? That are actually rooted in our own biases as educators, and yet grading for me as a teacher was frankly very personal and felt I had a lot of emotional attachment to it, and that's really common, frankly. So for some folks, it may be really, really tough to engage in some of these conversations because we haven't examined it in a while, right? And then there may be some folks, so I would say that's, something that's much, that's happening, those conversations are happening a lot more at secondary. So that may feel really important for folks. And I would say in general, as people engage with the trainings, there may be a real range of emotions, and some folks may find that this direction doesn't feel like the way they want to go, right? Anti-marginalization, curriculum writing, that's how we offer paid curriculum writing time. There's no like, I need to just write math curriculum right now. It's not how it works. It's through the lens of anti-marginalization curriculum, which is really different from the way that we've done it before. We used to say, here's department time, go for it. Write how you write it. And then Mary had this great quote. She said some version of, I know that we used, I know as we were talking about this, I was like, oh, is there a way forward, right, when we were first starting to talk about this? And she said, I think I, for many years, used to just write curriculum, and my own racism and structures of oppression were infused into that curriculum because I never did it through this lens, I never did it through this lens, then I would just recreate the same problematic curriculum. So we're not going to do that anymore, right? We're committing to not doing that in any way. I would say overall, as a community, I hear really positive feedback. We push out reviews or evaluations to educators when they complete different professional development opportunities, and we ask them about the preparedness of the presenters around whether or not they feel like they can use the information and the pedagogy itself, and we get really positive responses in general. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I can add one thing for the folks listening and for the folks in the room. What we're doing is grounded in significant research, educational research. We can now say with much confidence in 2022 that every student benefits from a multicultural education, every student. And then now, and we shared it at our admin retreat, there's a significant amount of research now that supports how to scale and have sustainable culturally responsive pedagogy in multicultural education. And what you see in our Learning Forward ICSD are the key tenets that is grounded in this academic town. You hear me clearly, grounded in academic research. Being critically reflective, developing culturally responsive educators and curriculum, interrupting oppressive school contexts, and then the last one, engaging indigenous community and context and people. So you see us partnering with students and the community. So for the folks who want to check to see if what we're doing is grounded in best practice and research, yes, and we have all the receipts, all right? And we can also say now that this benefits everybody. So I would say that in 2022, if a school district is not doing this at scale and for everybody, we aren't doing, it can be deemed educational malpractice. Because now we know what we should be doing and what we must do. It's up to us now to do.
To that point, I would encourage my fellow board members to read the book Grading for Equity. If you wanted to, and the community to read the book. I know we've had teachers that have been engaged in this text. And like any book, you're not gonna agree with everything, but the idea of being thought-provoking and pushing, and as a faculty member who has to assess students on a regular basis, it's made me question about the way in which I assess students, and is it equitable, right? Grading a student who's typing a 15-page paper on their iPhone compared to someone who has multiple laptops. And how do I then engage? Am I taking off points because it has a double period someplace, right? It just made me think a little bit more deeply about the ideas versus ways in which I'm trying to hold folks accountable for things that may not be reflective of their intellect or their ability. So to that point, we hear a great deal in our community about literacy. And can I ask you all just to speak briefly about the work that we're doing around literacy? We've seen the data come out, right, post-COVID, and where we may find ourselves as a nation. We know there's gonna be more and more focus on making sure our young babies can read. And so I'm just wondering if we can speak a little bit about some of the literacy work that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll jump in. We are using Dr. Goldie Muhammad's 5 pursuits and identity. Who am I as a reader, writer, scientist? Criticality. Why am I learning this? And what am I going to do with it? Intellect, how is it making me better and smarter? And the joy of learning as well. And so when we're looking at our work around literacy, we are actually having conversations, let's look at your literacy block or your class. Where are you finding intellect, criticality, joy? Where are those surfacing? Because there's a great one image that keeps coming to mind for me when thinking about literacy is the either or paradigm, that either we teach kids to read so they can do really well on a test, or they have the opportunity to express themselves. And questioning that approach to the literacy block design has been at the heart of the last 3 years since we started engaging with Dr. Goldie Muhammad's text. So we have adopted really great reading district-wide. We have even some pre-K classrooms using it, but it's first instruction in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, and then it's used as an intervention 3rd through 12th grade, specifically around phonics, and that being one component. We're in year 2, I really like to say year 0, I like that, so probably year 1, not year 2, if we count last year's year 0. So you may hear from educators and caregivers asking a lot about that because it's new. And so Lynn Klankowski and I have been doing a listening tour right now around reading assessments and how do we know what students know and what are the challenges of the assessment, what are the strengths of them, and what do we need to do differently given that? And so I would say that between the really great reading launch and continually offering opportunities for the literacy block design at the elementary level, but then also the structures of reading at the secondary level, like how do you offer a reading writing lab that enhances a student's experience rather than give them, one more maybe a non-credit bearing course. We have some new courses at the high school this year launched that are credit bearing and support literacy work. So that's a overview. It's such a big topic. I will say that today I have been sent the podcast Sold the Story by 5 different educators. So that's a podcast that's out right now engaging in conversations around the science of reading and what that means. And there actually some of the assessments we've used in our district are featured in that podcast questioning.
What's the name of the podcast?
Sold the Story. I can add it. Yeah. It's
very much. Other board member questions?
Well, it's kudos to you all because the anti-marginalization curriculum, we had 125 participants this summer compared to what it was at the beginning several years ago. So we're going in the right direction with hopes that the educators who participate are telling others. Since one of my pet peeves is not mandatory that we have some of the training that we professional development, but yet at least people are spreading the word.
And we're working on that pet peeve. Having great conversations with the Ithaca Teachers Association leadership. We just had a really productive meeting yesterday and have had them since the spring in order to figure out ways to make sure educators feel supported and are appropriately compensated in order to ensure that folks are engaging with the micro-credential in particular.
Phenomenal. Just an interesting where the journey that has been on, and most importantly, the foundation that's built to do the work. And we hear it regularly, so I'm also very appreciative of the ongoing professional development that is not sort of a one and done and then leave alone. The idea of sort of implementation in the classroom and then how do I do it throughout the school year. It's just a much different place than I know where it was at when I was teaching in the SCIP district. It didn't seem this comprehensive and sort of amount of wraparound is very impressive. So thank you to all the other educators for the work that's being done.
Agreed. Also, Lily, maybe you could talk a little bit about what you talked about at the PTA Council this morning about the professional development that is, and you touched upon it, but specifically to help teachers with handling restorative justice, you know, as a foundation, which is the foundation for the code of conduct that we are drafting and anticipating passing soon.
And we can talk a bit more of the code of conduct hearing
Right.
on December 13th and go into much more depth. But briefly, I will let folks know that Dr. Jan Bryman and Mr. Corey Mitchell, who's an associate principal at Ithaca High School, and I have been working and leading the work around restorative justice and professional development and learning for kids and for staff. So right now we're in this year zero, as I like to say, where we're laying some foundational work for later implementation. Right now we're working with the Drs. Wynn, Dr. Maisha T. Wynn and Dr. Lawrence T. Wynn, who are the founders of the Transformative Justice and Education Center that's out of UC Davis. Dr. Maisha T. Wynn is the author of Justice on Both Sides and has done extraordinary research and work with school districts around implementing restorative justice and sustaining that work. So, couldn't believe it. We wrote to them last spring and Dr. Maisha T. Wynn wrote back. And now we're working with them, which is really exciting. They're training 25 kids, grades 6 through 12 at our 4 secondary schools and 25 educators from all across the school district. And we're learning separately from one another throughout the year, and then at the end of June, we're gonna come all together and learn the actual restorative justice circle processes and other ways forward, some of the more of the nuts and bolts of it all in order to turnkey those trainings in our buildings and throughout the school district. That's exciting stuff.
So is this year 0 now of the
Yes.
the 4 students and the 4 educators?
25 and 25, yeah. Yep, this is
I would also humbly say we're gonna be back in year 0 again next year, once we pass a new code of conduct.
Right, yeah.
So the implementation of it will be supported by this professional development work and ongoing work as well.
Yeah.
So it will be a culture shift. Before we let folks go, Elder, do you have?
Just one quick comment, Maureen and I and Dr. Brown went to the New York State School Board Association meeting a couple of weeks ago, and listening to some of the presenters, something that should have been obvious to me wasn't until I heard some of them. New York State has adopted something called the culturally responsive and sustainable framework. I swear, as those folks who were relatively new in their positions, right, either the superintendents or executives were talking about that, I found myself thinking, that's our stuff. But wait, that's our stuff, right? So, not saying take a bow or anything like that, but we need to recognize that not just this district, I'd say maybe 5 or 6 districts that we know of, and we know the leaders, because they come play with us in the summertime during our diversity conference. We've really moved this state quite a ways. And I'm amazed that they have 6-month superintendents, 3-month superintendents presenting this now because they have they have it in a box. We have this in a box. Some things, some districts are ahead of us on, like restorative justice. And again, kudos to that too, but that was pretty, the first time that really sank in what this group has accomplished over 12 years since bringing Dr. Brown here. It's now being touted by the state as a structure for all 700 districts to follow. So thank you for continuing to work. Sean says, we ain't finished. There's a lot up there that we still have to do some work on, but having participated in several things up there, that's some intense stuff. Really intense stuff. I'm glad we're giving our teachers the opportunity to grow. So, thank you.
Thank you, Eldred, and thank you for the support of the board and the community to make this all happen. And it's constantly evolving. What you're talking about too is as Dr. Brown alluded to earlier, researched best practices, right? So what's in the culturally responsive and sustaining framework for New York State is really based on research, which is very much reflective of what we're trying to do as well, in addition to being responsive to the educators that we work with and the kids.
To the community, I would recommend taking a look at that document, and I say this with great humility. It is our stuff because some of us helped write it. So,
I wasn't gonna call you out.
Take a look. Thank you all for being here, it's fantastic. We will keep moving on with our agenda, and agenda item 11.2 is the Human Resource Committee update, and I'll pass it to my colleague, Maureen.
Okay, well, I'm gonna be pretty brief, and my colleagues on that committee, Dr. Jill Tripp and Mr. Christopher Malcolm, can chime in when they have anything that I'm missing. What's that?
The whole name.
And the whole name, yes, and you're not even in trouble.
I know, right?
Anyway, so a big focus of the work of the Human Resources Committee, it has to do with looking at what are we doing for recruitment and retention of the finest educators and staff members, so we don't just look at teachers, but all of the folks, and gathering data, and we're being, very ably assisted by Ladira Velasquez Sims and Mr. Robert Van Kuren, and their colleagues in the HR office, bringing us data and information on, what is going on in terms of our recruitment and retention efforts. And it was supposed to happen at this meeting, but because Gladira needed to be out of town unexpectedly, at our next meeting, which is on November 29th, there will be a presentation, a substantial presentation about recruitment and retention efforts in the district. And another thing that the HR committee is doing, and it's gonna be happening soon, is we're going to be getting updates on our untenured building leaders, principals and associate principals, and we have quite a few of them. And this is akin to what we have been doing for a number of years, which is that the HR committee has been hearing from directors and principals about their untenured teachers and what strengths are they showing, what supports do they need, and a lot of those principals who have participated in that, in talking about their untenured teachers, have involved the teachers themselves in that review process, which I think we found to be a very valuable thing, to be asking those folks to be reflective about where they are and where they want to go. And always there is the question of, what support does the person need to be successful? So I think with our untenured building leaders, we're going to be asking them to participate in a reflection on where they are. So, Malcolm, anything to add?
I think we've had reason to think we might be moving forward in some way on the retiree health insurance issue. And I suspect that will be again part of our next meeting.
I think so, yes, because we did set a timeline for which the superintendent and his designees were going to come back to us with some information that we had requested and discussed this about a month ago.
So when is our next HR meeting?
Our next HR meeting would be the first Tuesday in December, which is our regular.
Okay.
Great, thank you very much. Policy committee update.
Well, since Moira's been speaking at length about HR and you were unable to be at our last policy meeting,
that's
I'll give
right,
a
I
very
forgot.
quick one then. Well, I'm back here looking at the agenda to remind myself what we talked about. And we had 3 policies on our agenda and we discussed the first 2 of them. We were working on some policies in the 6000 series, which are budget and finance related policies. The first was policy 6150, budget transfers. And basically that had been adopted in 1996 and not revised until 2007. And basically what it did was what Amanda had requested was, or suggested, was for us to raise the amount of monies that we could transfer without bringing it to a special vote. And it was, I think, would go up to, I have it down here. $10,000. And we will we'll still be aware of them. They'll all be listed, but it's not something that we have to vote on. So that was I think that will be coming to the board at the next meeting. We didn't want to get it on right away. And then our second
We wanted to get finance committee to take a look at that before we run.
Right, I think we want finance committee to look at both of them. And our second policy was 6240 investment policy. And this was actually a very lengthy policy that governed basically a philosophy of investment, what the school board can and cannot do wisely with its money, preservation of capital, safety above all else, no speculation, who has authority, prudence, diversification, internal controls, authorized institutions, securing deposits and investments, and actually Amanda had quite a bit of assistance from
Or
3+1.
I think maybe it was 3 plus 1. Some financial.
It's 3+1.
it's 3+1,
It's
okay, on
And don't worry, we'll review all of the policies in finance committee on Thursday, and your feedback will be incorporated into the policy rewrite.
Okay.
And we did not really look at any rewriting of this because this is a lot of very financially specific language, but it was actually fascinating and you know, who we can get them from and, you know, what keeps the taxpayers' money safe so that the district can use what it needs and doesn't lose anything. And again, this has not been updated in quite a long time and was probably overdue, but it's in the works now.
Some of that's beyond policy is laws and restrictions of
Well,
what we can
And
and
this
can't do.
and this
Yeah, so-
incorporates it, but it sets it out. It sets it out so it's
So in terms of our revision of, or, you know, reviewing and revising, some of it had to do with changes in law, which has made it necessary to change the policy to follow the law. And then, I think for us, it was, you know, asking questions and then in some cases, making suggestions for wording just for clarity and, for a,
Dating it.
and clarity for a not necessarily expert, reader.
Curious, the idea of categories of investments come up in the conversation, like what would we stray from as a school district?
there's a chart attached to it.
Oh, okay, that I did not look at, but I know.
We can say,
It's at the end. I think it hasn't gone around
Oh,
yet.
okay.
It's going to go to finance
In general,
on Thursday.
there are people, at our level, we don't get into specifics about what particular stuff, but there are categories, like bikes,
Eligible securities for collateral.
that I will take a look.
and you can find it either at the last policy agenda,
Yes.
it's listed there, or on the upcoming finance agenda, it would list both policies.
You don't want our money being invested in Remington per se, right?
Apparently,
Sweatshops.
we can invest in the 3 highest grades of bonds relating to Puerto Rico. So that's just one that I pulled from the chart. I'm leaving that to someone else. And then we were going to tackle policy 2350 board meeting procedures, which we've kind of talked about for quite a while. What is the most efficient use of our time and what best serves our population? You know, our student reps, our community members, our visitors to present to us, our executive staff. We only had about 10 minutes left in the meeting, and since there were only 2 of us here, we just decided to table that and swing around to it next month. So I have to say I've seldom seen Amanda Verba happier than when delving into the 6,000 series. Apparently she's been waiting for this for quite some
This is
time.
a wheelhouse, absolutely.
And it was a departure for policy, I would say.
Yes.
But necessary.
Well, thank you both for sojourning on. I will say, as exciting as the audit committees are, it includes not only a financial review of the balance sheets of where the district is, it also includes a review of our policies and recommendations of what policies need updating. And these were a couple of policies, as passed and stated, that the amount of money we're using for automatic transfers was, I think at that point in time, $2,000. The world has changed since we last updated it, and so that's partly what's taking place. So looking forward to that conversation on finance. What I will add about policy 2350, part of the conversation was demonstrated this evening about whether or not the board will go into an exec session for how long. And while we have student reps and we have special presentations that would include students in public comment, is there a way for us to have a much more consistent time of expectation and then go into executive session? That's one thing that we'll be discussing about what that could look like at policy. Thank you for the very happy looks, Mr. Malcolm, I appreciate that.
I can't see you like this, so I've got like over my glasses. Is that better?
That is fantastic. We will continue on with our agenda, school district business. And up next is agenda item 12.1, the NISBA, but I believe this is the National School Board Association Equity Symposium Authorization.
Well, I'll move it, but, and can I get a second? And then I wanna say something.
Yes, well, move to approve expenditures for attendance at the National School Boards Association Equity Symposium, January 28th, 2023, for the following board members: Eldred Harris.
Second.
What I would like to do is I would like to attend this as well, so.
So you'd like to modify this
Yeah.
motion to add your name as well
Yes.
for more?
So I'll second for the modification to add more to life. Road dogs.
Yes, I want audio recordings of.
Well,
Any-
we went to NISBA together,
That's
so.
correct, that's correct. Any questions or comments about the motion? All in favor with the inclusion of Moira going to this conference as well? It is unanimous, or folks are here. Fantastic. The next agenda item we have is a special resolution to acknowledge the years of service of Paul Alexander. I will read the resolution first, and then we can move it and then second it if folks choose. Whereas the Ithaca City School District recognizes the service of Paul Alexander Sr. as an employee of the district for 45 years. And whereas his leadership of the district's facilities department has ensured the day-to-day operations to ensure that students could keep learning. And whereas his expertise and support of the 2019 capital project has led to substantial enhancements to the district's aesthetic and infrastructure. And whereas his longstanding knowledge of the history of the district consistently proved to be invaluable. And whereas his management of the record retention department provided easy access to over 100 years of files pertaining to the district. And whereas many learned from his deep commitment and loyalty to the district, now therefore be it resolved that the Ithaca City School District Board of Education recognizes and deeply appreciates the service of Paul Alexander Sr., and further that this resolution of appreciation and support be duly recorded and included in the minutes of the Ithaca City School District Board of Education on this 15th day of the month of November in the year 2022. We would need it to
second it?
I
we
will
would need
move-
to be moved.
I move the approval of this adoption of this resolution.
I second.
Moved by Pat, second by Eldred. Questions or comments? All in favor? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Are there any other discussion items from board members?
Quick one for me, I have some stuff to pass around real quickly, I brought back from NISBA. This is a great piece about student activism. Sent you guys some material which you probably haven't read yet, but when I say student activism, there are 3 students on a panel from the Seneca Nation tribe. And one of the students in particular talked about her capstone project, which was examining in the Seneca Nation where they could find graves, unmarked graves, I guess they would be called, that were legacies of those, what do you wanna call them, boarding schools affectionately? And they bought the house down. So there's that. I'm also including some information about a corporation that was there. Dr. Brown said he had some engagement with these folks. They are trying to help districts like ours identify, celebrate, and quantify qualitative data. Like curriculum, we're talking about how we can best allow us in our community to see all of the good work and all the good experiences students are having through the learning forward concepts and others. And we've all been talking about surveys, right, and interviews with students, but our company is trying to take one step beyond that. So I'll pass these two around, you guys can look at it if you have time, if you have interest. And they don't have to come back to me, I want them to go to our stellar executive staff members over there, Lily and Mary.
Elder, if it's okay by you, can I ask Emily to scan these and email them to everybody as well? Does that work? So we can all receive them. Fantastic. And then upcoming dates of importance. I think it is essential to state in a public session that as the Ithaca City School District is responsive to students who continue to bring things to our attention, for example, an academic calendar, and folks may have noticed a shift in the academic calendar that has also included a shift in school board meetings. For example, we did not hold a school board meeting on Election Day last Tuesday. That is new for us. We will not be holding any school board related meetings next Tuesday, the evening before folks go on break. We're trying to be responsive to our folks as well, which means that we will have a facilities meeting on this Thursday at 5 p.m. followed by a finance committee meeting at 6:30 this Thursday as well. And then we will not meet next week, and our next board meeting will be on November 29th. But this is all in our awareness to try to make sure that we are being as responsive and responsible as possible with the meetings that we hold. So looking forward to seeing folks on Thursday, and looking forward to seeing those folks who aren't on either one of those committees in 2 weeks. Our next school board full voting meeting will be on the 29th. And with that, we will bring our meeting to a close. Thank you, everybody. We will see you all soon. Have a good evening.
You too.
Want to see you.